I'm Marcy Winograd. I am so honored to be here with Medea Benjamin, co-founder of CODEPINK, for our debut segment of CODEPINK Radio called Empire on the Rocks. Welcome, Medea.
Hey, Marcy, great to be on with you and start this new project.
I know, it's exciting, right? Empire on the Rocks. So you might look around and you say, well, I don't know, Trump is on the ascendancy, maybe not public opinion wise, but the right seems to be on the ascendancy globally. But when you think about it, they are in trouble, in serious trouble, right? Again, public opinion is at an all-time low, I believe, and they're always looking for new ways to get out of old traps that they've gotten themselves into. So we think the empire is on the rocks, and we're here to talk about three main topics today. One is what's happening with Gaza, Israel, this so-called peace plan, what we can do on the ground. We're going to talk a little bit about Medea. She's just back from Europe, where she attended an anti-war conference that was really exciting. We're also going to talk about the intersection of ICE and Israel and why it's so important. When we say demilitarize it, we talk about demilitarization abroad and at home because they are connected. And lastly, hopefully we'll have some time to talk about media consolidation. You know, the Ellisons, boy, they're looking to buy up everything, right? But there's light at the end of the tunnel. We will talk about alternative media sources that we ourselves rely on for the real news. Okay, so Medea, tell us what happened in Europe. You're just back.
It was so exciting, Marcy. I think that Europe is on fire on this issue. I mean, they have demonstrations that put us to shame. They get 1 million people out in the streets in Italy. In the UK, they have every single month large demonstrations, and people might have heard of how the UK government has banned Palestine Action, a direct action group that was focusing on Elbit systems and the UK's military collaboration with Israel. And now, as a response, every week it seems there are more and more people come out with these signs that say, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action, and they get swept up by the police, and more come out and more come out, and it makes the UK government look absolutely ridiculous, arresting people in their 90s, Holocaust survivors, blind people, all kinds of people. In Spain, there are also big protests in places like Madrid and Barcelona, and we say, well, the Spanish government is so good on this. Why do you even have to protest? And they say, that's the only reason it's good, and it's not good enough. And the same happens in Ireland, where we think, wow, that government is good. And they say, not good enough. We're getting out on the streets. The best governments in Europe right now are Spain, Ireland, Slovenia, and Belgium. But that's only because of tremendous pressure. And it's so interesting looking at Italy, what happened with the pressure, not just from people coming out in protest, but the labor unions, and especially the dock workers who said, you touch that, if Israel touches the flotilla, we're going out on strike. And sure enough, they went out on strike. And this has put so much pressure on the right-wing pro-Israel Italian government that they even symbolically had to send out a ship supposedly to help the flotilla, but really just to try to calm public opinion. So it's very interesting. There's also huge campaigns to ban Israel from sports and cultural events. One thing I found so interesting, they have much more of a unionized population, and the unions are very involved, but not the heads of the unions. They might come to speak at the protests, but they don't mobilize from the top down. The mobilization is really from the bottom up. So there's a lot of pressure on the union still to get more involved. And the other is the Muslim community. The Muslim community, I think, has been quite cowed in the United States because of all the repression. But in many places around Europe, the Muslim community is very active. Of course, they're active here in the U.S. I don't want to say they're not, but very active because there is a large Muslim community in many parts of Europe. So my report is that although Israel and Europe have such close ties, I mean, so, it was Europe that created Israel, not only the Holocaust, but taking the Palestinian land, and so many close ties trade-wise with Europe. It is forcing the level of mobilization is forcing changes within Europe, and that was very exciting to be a part of.
It does sound really exciting, and I'm so glad that you were able to go on behalf of Code Pink and talk as well about the prospects for a ceasefire in Gaza. It's just so heartbreaking, Medea, to wake up every day and see these reports about more people killed. Israel's continuing to bomb while supposedly this peace plan is to go into effect, which starts with a ceasefire, right? And exchange of political prisoners, hostages. Where are we at? Is there any possibility of a ceasefire on the horizon? I hope so.
I think there might well be a release of the hostages and an exchange of prisoners, or a release of the prisoners, the Palestinians. But people don't trust Israel for good reason, because every time there's been a ceasefire, they just violate it. Also, this 20-point plan is just ridiculous in some aspects of it, particularly this idea that Donald Trump and Tony Blair are going to be on this board of peace that will control what happens to the people of Gaza. And the Palestinians have been saying, look, it's Palestinians that have to decide what our future is going to be, not Donald Trump, who's been so complicit, and not Tony Blair, this war criminal from the Iraq War days. So this colonial kind of viewpoint of we're going to take over Gaza is just not going to fly with the Palestinian people.
Now, I know there is a second flotilla. We've had quite a few flotillas, as you know, you've been on them over the years, but I heard that a second one was intercepted, and Wright, also with Code Pink, has been sending out emails about this. Is that true?
Yes, the Conscience is the big boat, and then there are sailboats as well, and those have just been intercepted. And, these are creating quite a stir internationally, because on the one that just happened, there were 44 countries represented, including members of parliaments from different places around the world. While we can't get a member of our Congress to go on these flotillas, other countries have. And so this is creating a direct confrontation between governments. It's not just about the civilians on the ship. On the one that's being intercepted right now, there are many health professionals. They are bringing humanitarian aid. And I think these flotillas are playing such an important role of highlighting that why can't these civilian ships go to Gaza? And then also highlighting how people are treated when they're rounded up by the Israeli government and held in such terrible conditions. And this is nothing compared to what the Israelis do to Palestinians. But it is just helping really to mobilize around the world. So yes, we've been involved in these flotillas for a long time, but we're at a point now where it really has caught on fire.
Yes, I think those who question, like Piers Morgan, it was really hard to watch this guy question the viability of these flotillas. What good are they? What's their purpose? And I had to cheer for Jacob Berger, who was on one of the flotillas, because he was refuting Piers Morgan. And right after I watched that on social media, I think it was on my Facebook page, I saw the same talking points that Piers Morgan was reiterating, and that is there's no purpose to this flotilla. They're still fighting in Gaza, fighting. Of course, there's still Israeli bombing. But what I think people lose sight of is that this is a matter of shifting global public opinion, right? We don't want to just talk to ourselves. That's easy to do, right? We have to bring more people over. And when people see the Israeli government intercepting these flotillas, drone bombing them, imprisoning people, putting Greta Thunberg in a cell with bed bugs, dragging her by the hair, beating her up, demanding that Muslim women take off their hijab. I mean, this has a lot of power because it's the narrative that is driving much of this colonial extermination.
That's right. And Marcy, it's quite remarkable how the public opinion about Israel has just undergone a sea change in the last couple of months. There are reports out in the U.S. media how even among Jewish Americans, there's been such a change. And of course, we know that in general, this is a generational issue, whether it's Jewish Americans or Americans in general. The younger generation really gets it. And things like this flotilla, they see it on the social media. It's all over social media. And it really does make people outraged. And that's what we need to do, not just educate people, but get them angry enough that they're going to get involved.
And I think the fact that Trump insists on deploying military troops to our cities, I'm talking about DC, you're in DC, Chicago, Portland, Los Angeles, that is enraging people. That is galvanizing people to hit the streets and say, leave us alone. You have no business being here. And really, this is something that needs to be and is being challenged in the courts as well, because the Constitution says that it's Congress that is supposed to control the deployment of the military. We also have the Posse Comitatus Act of the late 1800s that said, look, you're not supposed to send military troops into cities. Although there is an exception. I think Trump, in hinting the other day that he might invoke the Insurrection Act, was looking at the exceptions to the Posse Comitatus Act, which basically says, look, if there's a local insurrection and the local police can't handle it, well, then federal troops can march in. But you know, I was just reading Rivera's son. She's with World Beyond War. She's also been an ally of CODEPINK. She wrote about Portland and how Fox News aired a piece on Portland with video from 5 years ago. And Trump saw this video and became enraged and said, we got to send in the federal troops.
To protect ICE, right?
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
you wrote a fantastic piece in Truth Out. It's really wonderful, and I recommend that people seek it out because you go into great detail about the connections between what's happening to Palestinians and the repression here at home. And I think, you know, people see it in a very superficial way when they go to ICE protests and they see people wearing keffiyehs or having Palestinian flags. But can you tell us some of these deeper connections?
Sure. Yes. This is my article, Israel and ICE, Two Sides of the Same Coin, in Truth Out right now. And my message, really the bottom line message, is that we can't just say abolish ICE and we can't just say free Palestine. We need to say demilitarize, both at home and abroad. That means free Palestine and abolish ICE. I talk about three intersecting points. So, for example, you have at the top of ICE leadership that has been trained in Israel. Jewish Voice for Peace did a campaign, the Deadly Exchange campaign, a few years back, using FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests to unearth and surface documents that show to the degree to which law enforcement at the local level, but at the state level and at the federal level with Homeland Security has been trained in Israel. And part of that training is racial profiling, which I talk about in the article. So here in Israel, not here in Israel, but over in Israel, you have racial profiling on a massive scale. The entire occupied Palestinian population is racially profiled, as we see in Gaza, with indiscriminate bombing of civilians, as you see in the West Bank at checkpoints, where people are racially profiled. And Trump has even said, I believe he said on television, we really need to look at Israel's model for racial profiling. And the courts, unfortunately, have disappointed us in this area. So we have racial profiling in Israel, and we have racial profiling with ICE, stopping any person of color, be they brown or black, as we see in Chicago, where they descended upon a residential neighborhood, an African-American neighborhood. So there's racial profiling. There's also this use, the employment of the Bible to justify what is not justifiable, right? So you have Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, talking about Moses parting the Red Sea, making this sort of veiled analogy to himself as being this prophet, this hero who's going to liberate Jews from the grip of Hamas as Moses parted the Red Sea. And then you have Homeland Security. If you visit their Facebook page, it looks farcical almost because it employs a lot of these biblical references and showing us ice agents descending into some underground, the bowels of the earth to free us from brown people, to free us from immigrants. This is the message of Homeland Security, people who are coming across the border without documents. And, you know, just a short aside, the American Prospect today has an article on how the Trump administration or people within the administration are a little worried about the impact of these ICE raids on our agricultural fields, that we might face a food shortage because who's picking the fruit, right?
Well, this is a long time, Marcy. This isn't new where they have the agricultural big business has been saying, wait, we need these immigrants, and showing these images of fields with the vegetables and the fruits rotting. So, yes. But going back to your article, Marcy, the part that was really frightening to me is this connection on the level of the surveillance. Can you talk about the companies that are both American and Israelis and how they're working together to create this surveillance society?
Yes, so this is Big Brother on steroids. If you go to Israel, if you go to Tel Aviv, you'll see headquarters for some of these big tech, these giants. You'll see a headquarters for Google, for Microsoft, for Palantir. That's in the business of surveillance. Now, Google, at their headquarters, supposedly it's very pleasing to the eye. You have colorful rooms, recessed lighting. You can take yoga while you work on software for the Israeli military to bomb, destroy, eviscerate Gaza. And of course, there are tech workers in rebellion, not only at Google, but Microsoft, which is very involved in cloud storage for the Israeli military and in surveillance. You know, all of these companies, they cross over between providing cloud storage and AI for targeting civilians and also for surveilling civilian phone calls. I think the IDF, some people call it the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Forces, had a goal of surveilling 1 million calls an hour in the West Bank. So I have to say thank you to No Tech for Apartheid, No Azure for Apartheid. Azure, that's the cloud computing program from Microsoft, because they have been on the front lines organizing tech workers within all of these giants to say, we don't want any part of this. And let's include Apple in that as well. CODEPINK has been in front of Apple stores saying, don't buy the new iPhone, because Apple also has research and development centers in Israel. It's cracking down on employees that are speaking out for Palestine. Now,
And
what
there's
happened?
a victory lately, right? With
Yes, I was just going to talk about that. What happened with Microsoft, you know, you look at the pictures, if you go online, you look at the pictures of the workers at Microsoft and former employees who've been fired at their protests. You know, first they occupied the president's office at Microsoft in Redmond, Washington, and then they, well, allegedly, I don't know, somebody poured red paint all over the Microsoft logo in the plaza there in Redmond and lay some corpses, you know, makeshift bodies on the platform, the base of the logo. And lo and behold, not long after, the president of Microsoft blogged that they were not going to be contracting, at least not in the way they were, with the Israeli military. To what extent Microsoft is cutting off all of its contracts with Israel remains to be seen. But we do have to accept this, have to celebrate this as a victory and empowerment of the workers and the tech workers. And there are also groups on college campuses, I should add, that are organizing students in the STEM programs, science, technology, to say, we won't work for Palantir because Palantir is deeply involved in the surveillance state, not just there, but also here in the United States with
I was so
contract ICE.
surprised reading in your article, Marcy. I had no idea that they got a contract from ICE during the Biden administration.
Oh, yeah. Now, one of the contracts was stalled, and because Biden was concerned it might be used inappropriately. Uh, Trump doesn't have that issue. So it's full steam ahead with these tech giants in surveillance. And there's also a lot of talk about other technologies that will be able to invade our phones. So, that brings us to a discussion of how do we communicate? And I think that's really important. And we can let's talk about alternatives to communicating. As I in the now involved, it's surveillance state, it's cloud computing, it's targeting of civilians. At least those are the reports that we're reading from former Google workers. So people are shifting to other media companies, other online venues. But let's talk about media and then go into why it's so important to look at media at a time when we see increasing centralization and consolidation of the media in the United States.
Well, yes. I mean, let's talk about that, Marcy, because it is so scary to see what is happening with the Ellisons, the father and the son, the buying up of these major media companies.
So Larry Ellison decided, and Netanyahu just recently said, the war is really on social media. We have to control the narrative. We have to buy TikTok. So all of this talk about China being a threat because ByteDance was controlled by Chinese interests. And so the Congress and the White House pushed to say, you know what, TikTok, if you continue to be under the control of ByteDance, we're going to cut off your ability to communicate with people in the United States. So as a result, ByteDance is supposed to be sold in January to TikTok US for the Ellisons. Now, it's not direct control. It's through an investment corporation that involves Larry Ellison, the father, as well as Rupert Murdoch. Now, Larry Ellison, he is, what I've read, he's the largest private donor to the IDF, okay? He's given over 20 million to the IDF since 2014. He very much says he stands with Israel. And the whole point of taking over TikTok in the United States is to suppress news about Palestine, to deplatform, and by that I mean I shadow ban. Basically, if I'm for Palestine and I'm on TikTok in February of this year and I post something, who is going to see it? Maybe I'll be allowed to post it and 13 people will see it. I don't know. That's my experience on Twitter already. So the Ellisons have a tight grip on, or will have a very tight grip on TikTok, but also they're involved in conglomerates that control Paramount, Skydance, CBS. They want to control CNN. So there's a vast array in this media empire of subsidiaries that the Ellisons, like that with Israel, are seeking or already control. And Barry Weiss has just been named the editor of the news division at CBS, which is under Paramount, which the Ellisons have a large stake in as well. So what are we going to do?
Yeah, can you just quickly explain who Barry Weiss is?
Oh, yeah. So Barry Weiss, she has a media company herself. It's called the Free Press. I don't really read it, but I believe she puts out a lot of what we call Hasbara PR for Israel, both on her blog and in podcasts. So she's thrilled that she's got control of the news over at CBS. So that's the first channel I'm going to turn off. But the other point is that there are alternatives, right? So one of my favorite alternatives is the CODEPINK radio show that we are on right now with Empire on the Rocks, but also the CODEPINK blog. So I'm going to just turn it back to you, Medea, for you to discuss some of your favorite alternative media sources.
Well, yes, but before I forget, I mean, you mentioned how do we communicate with each other, and let's not forget the best way of communicating, which is in person. And Code Pink now has many chapters around the country, which is very exciting. And so I think getting together in community is the best thing we can do right now. You can go online and look at where there are chapters. If there's one near you, please join it. And if there's not, create one. And you don't need more than 3 or 4 people to create a chapter and get out there and cause some great trouble. So that's my #1 favorite way of communicating. After that, I think I wake up every morning and put on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. It's my breakfast information. I feel like the day is not complete if I didn't get a chance to watch her. I also have a lot of respect for a number of the online sources right now, like Dropsite News, The Intercept, Zeteo with Mehdi Hassan. There, of course, is Truth Out, where Marcy was just published. I publish a lot in Common Dreams. We have uh, the you can turn on Al Jazeera, which you can get on your just on your computer, which has amazing coverage of Gaza. In fact, so many of the journalists who've been killed have been journalists that have been reporting for Gaza. What else would you recommend, Marcy?
Well, Counterpunch, I often publish in Counterpunch in Los Angeles. We have LA Progressive, but it's not confined just to LA. I like to listen to podcasts. Best of the Left is one of my favorites. Sheer Post. Um,
Katie Halper and Aaron and you.
yes. And The Gray Zone, Gabor.
I listen to Judge Napolitano because I think he has great people on there.
Yes, Aaron Monte and Max Blumenthal, I like them as well. And in terms of alternatives to CNN, you mentioned Al Jazeera. I also tune in now and then to TRT, that's Turkish radio television. You know, not everybody is good on everything, but they have a lot that is worth watching. And while we're talking about alternative media, I want to turn right back around to Marco Rubio because he was part of that drop site article. And if you're not reading drop site news, check it out because this article is really enlightening. And it talks about the engagement and the involvement of Larry Ellison, the big donor to the IDF, Tony Blair, who has been charged with overseeing Gaza with Donald Trump under this 20-point peace plan, and let's see, Marco Rubio, Larry Ellison, and Tony Blair. Yes. So in the drop site news, it mentions how Freedom of Information Act and other requests have unearthed news that Marco Rubio was bolstered by Larry Ellison, a big donor to the Republican Party, who said, you know, this guy, he is a true blue believer in Israel as a racist supremacist state, I'll add. And we need to promote him to the Trump administration, Marco Rubio. And lo and behold, Marco Rubio becomes Secretary of State. And mind you, this is after Trump ridiculed him during one of the presidential runs, used to call him Little Marco. And Larry Ellison apparently also really admired Marco Rubio's stance, his ardent opposition to Cuba, and to his loyalty to right-wing governments in Latin America. So read all about it in Drop Site News. And in addition, it says that Larry Ellison has given $350 million to the Tony Blair Institute, something we probably never heard of before now. So this institute is, you can imagine what it's promoting if it's involved in the Gaza peace plan to ensure that Israel permanently occupies Gaza, even though that's not what the plan says, right?
And let's not forget that Marco Rubio is on the forefront of these threats to Venezuela, the blowing up of the ships carrying supposed drug dealers. We have no idea who they are, but I think what Marco Rubio really wants is regime change in Venezuela. So he's bad on the Middle East, he's bad on Latin America, and unfortunately, he has big backers with big money.
But we have the people power. And that's what I constantly remind people. You know, it's easy to be cynical. It's easy to lose hope when you see all these people being bombarded and starved by Israel, or you see our ginning up war in Eastern Europe. You see us attacking Venezuela. But at the end of the day, we really need to know our neighbors. We need to be prepared. If troops come to our city, to defend each other nonviolently, but to be surrounding those who invade our communities, and to be out on the street, as you mentioned, in opposition to U.S. imperialism. So with that, any final thoughts, Medea?
Well, I'm out on the streets when I'm home every night at 7 o'clock with my neighbors, and it's happening all over Washington, D.C., where we go out and bang pots and pans. And in my neighborhood where we do it, there are National Guard troops on the street. So I would say never get used to having armed guards, armed soldiers on our streets. This is not the America that we want to live in. We don't want ICE. We don't want the National Guard in our communities. And certainly we don't want to be supporting genocide. So a lot to do. And I'm excited to be doing it with you, Marcy, with Code Pink, and with so many wonderful people around the world.
Well said, Medea Benjamin, co-founder of CODEPINK. I'm Marcy Winograd. Thank you so much for joining us on Empire on the Rocks. This is a new segment for CODEPINK Radio, our CODEPINK Radio podcast. Also tune into that. You can find out more about CODEPINK at codepink.org. Join one of our campaigns. So thank you for joining us. Peace with justice.
See you in 2 weeks.